Hello and welcome back to fineLEARN. I am Kostubi. Here in this lecture we will try to cover chapter 12, that is the state and the Varna society in the age of the Buddha, from your history NCERT book by Sharma. So in the last few lectures that we were discussing, that was regarding the time period of 6th century BC in the history of ancient India, right? That is towards the later part of the Vedic period, right? In that period we discussed how different religions like Jainism and Buddhism emerged, how the Mahajanapads emerged in the northern part of India, right? And during the same time we also discussed about the different foreign invasions that happened in the northwestern frontier of India, right? So all these were happenings in the 6th century BC. Now in this lecture again we will be discussing about the same period, that is the 6th century BC or the age of the Buddha. Fine. Now in this lecture we will discuss about the material life of the people during that age. We will talk about the administrative policies, we will talk about the social orders, we will talk about the taxation system in the period, we will talk about the republics in that period, how they function, what are the differences of republics with the monarchies, etc. Right? So as we begin, first we will try to discuss the material life during the period of Buddha, right? Now the sources for study of material life that we have are the Pali texts, right? The earliest Buddhist texts were written in Pali, right? And the Jaina texts were written in Prakrit, fine? Then we have the Sanskrit literature, the Sutra literature, and we also have archaeological evidence from various sites in northern India, right? Now this phase, that is the 6th century BC, this phase also marks the beginning of a different kind of pottery. Alright, it marks the beginning of a different kind of pottery phase, which we call as the northern black polished ware phase, right? Northern black polished ware phase. Now this is again a kind of pottery, right? Which is called the NBP, that is the northern black polished ware. Right? Now, what is the speciality of this kind of pottery? Right? Now, earlier to NBP, we had the painted grey ware pottery, right? Now, we have the NBP, that is the northern black polished ware. Now, the speciality of this kind of pottery is that it is a very fine kind of pottery, right? Very fine kind of pottery, a very glossy, shiny type of pottery, which has a black, shining surface, right? And this the northern black pottery that we find, it actually shows that now during this phase, during the age of Buddha, an element of luxury has been added to the lives of the people, right? Because this kind of pottery, it is evident that this pottery was not for regular use, alright, and it apparently seemed that it served as the tableware of the elites or the rich people in the society, right? So it was a kind of luxury item, alright, for the rich, right? Now, from archaeological evidences, this, if you look at the map here, the area that is shaded in dark, that area actually represents the northern black polished ware sites, alright, northern black polished ware sites, alright. So this is the area which we have towards the northwestern part of India, then we have towards the northeastern part of India, then we also have a few sites towards the southern part of India. We have Ujjain here, Nasik, then Amaravati, right? Then here towards Gujarat we have, then towards the northwestern part we have Taxila, all these areas. Like here we have Shravasti, Champa. So towards these are the areas where we find evidences of northern black polished ware, right? Now this phase, the northern black polished ware phase, this phase coincides with the phase of the growth of the Mahajanapads in the northwestern India. Right. Now, during this phase, as we have already seen, iron is now used, right? Iron is now used. So, this is a phase of the Iron Age culture, alright? That is, the Iron Age culture in India was going on during this phase. Now, as we have discussed in our previous initial lectures, initially we talked about the Stone Age, right? Then we talked about the Metal Age, right? Now, again, in Metal Age, we talked about three phases. First was the first metal to be used, that was copper, right? Copper phase was there. Then we had the bronze, use of bronze, and then we have the use of iron. So now we are in this phase, that is use of iron. People are now well acquainted with the use of iron. They are now acquainted with the richest iron mines of the country, right? So we will see a growth in the economy. We will see a growth in the agricultural field, right? So this is the phase which we actually call as a phase of second urbanization in India. Alright, we will see how, right? Now, NBP phase, it marks the beginning of a second urbanization in India. Why second urbanization? What is the first urbanization in India? The first urbanization was during the Harappa phase, right? The Harappan civilization, right? That was the first urban civilization in India, right? Now, Harappan civilization, it disappeared in around 1500 BC. Yes, it disappeared in around 1500 BC. Now, after 1500 BC to up to around 1000 years, we do not have any urban civilization growing again, right? The civilizations or the settlements which followed were again rural, alright? But after around 1000 years, now we have the northern black polished ware phase, which is a kind of urban phase in India, right? So this is the second urbanization phase in India after the Harappan civilization, right? Now, during this phase, why do we call it as an urban? We will come to know as we go through the slides, right? Now, during this phase, we have the use of iron implements, right? For different tools and implements were used for agriculture and for crafts, right? So they flourished. Then there was also the beginning of metallic money. Alright, metallic money is now being used, right? Now, beginning of crafts, commerce and urbanization happened in the Middle Gangetic Basin, right? Middle Gangetic Basin. So, in this area, we have a kind of second urbanization in India. Alright, now trade also flourished in this phase. As we have seen, trade was a very important part of the Harappan civilization, right? And most of the people were into trade there, right? And it was also believed that Harappan civilization, during the Harappan civilization, the society was ruled by a group of traders, right? Now, after the Harappans, in this phase, that is in the NBP phase or the NBPW, Northern Black Polished Ware phase, we have a second urbanization in India. Alright, trade and commerce now flourished. Now, as we are talking about the material life, we see that now important towns have grown, alright, important towns have grown, and most of the towns they lay on the river banks and the trade routes, which makes trade and commerce easy, right? Then we see that we have mentioned in the Vedic texts and the Pali literatures that the products of the crafts were carried over long distances, which actually tells us that there was a good network of trade during that period, right? Then we have a town, Shravasti, that is in Kosala kingdom. We have discussed it while talking about the Mahajanpans, okay? Shravasti is linked to Kausambi and Varanasi, right? Varanasi during this period was a great center of trade, right? Great center of trade. Now, trade, as we have seen that now there is the beginning of the use of metallic money. Now, trade is facilitated by the use of money, right? In our Vedic texts, we have certain terms like the Nishka or the Satamana, which refer to coins, alright? So, we know that now coins are being used and these are actually facilitating the trade in that period, right? The first metal coins appeared in the age of Buddha. And what are the earliest coins? We already know, right? That is the punch marked coins, which are mainly made of silver. Some are also made of copper. And these were earliest, they were found in eastern UP and Bihar, right? Or Magadha, which is in Bihar, right? So, during this phase, we also have the use of wood, okay? Wood was used extensively during this phase. We see the use of wooden palisades in Patna. Palisades, that is like kind of fences, okay, wooden fences. And we also see the use of wood as a construction material, like in many houses were made of wood, right? Most of the houses were made of mud, brick and also wood, okay. So we can see use of wood was prevalent. Now the different settlements, they actually show that there was an increase in population during this period. Alright, now the towns, they turned out to be markets and they were settled by merchants and artisans. Yes, city of Champa, that was in the Prakrit text, that was mentioned to as Vanyagama. Okay, Vanyagama, which actually means a settlement of merchants. Alright, so we now know how important trade has become. Alright, then Saddalaputta, this is a place at Vaishali, which has around 500 potters' shops. Okay, these are actually mentioned in the different Pali text or the Prakrit text or the Brahminic or the Sanskrit texts of this period, right? Then we also have the mention of a Vesa street, which means a merchant street in Varanasi. Alright, merchant street in Varanasi. And the different crafts activities, they were organized into guilds. What are guilds? Guilds are like, organizations or associations of people having the similar interests, alright? Like we may have a guild of merchants, a guild of painters, a guild of carpenters, like that. Alright, so crafts were organized into guilds and they were under a respective headman. Alright, there was a headman who was looking after that guild. Alright, and the crafts were mainly hereditary. Alright, like the son learned it from his father and this way it continued. Right, now another important development during this phase is writing. Alright, which actually facilitated the bookkeeping of trade. Right, bookkeeping of trade, then tax collection and also the maintenance of army, right? Because now during this period, as we have increase in agriculture, we have collection of taxes, then we also have the maintenance of large or a professional army, right? So development of writing is actually an important point during this period. Now, as we talk of the towns or the cities during this period, we should also understand that this period has a strong rural base, right? A strong rural base has to be there because the people who lived in the towns or the cities, they were non-agriculturalists, right? They were into trade, they were merchants, or they were into other activities but not into agriculture. So those people had to be fed by the villages, right? The villagers were mainly agriculturalists and these people had to feed the people in the towns, and in return the people in the towns, they produced different things or different accessories that are like cloth, maybe tools or implements that could be used by the villagers, right? So there was also a strong rural base during that period. And the Pali text, they mention about numerous villages during that period. Alright, numerous villages and towns were located amidst clusters of villages. Alright, and nucleated rural settlements, they also appeared first during the age of Buddha. What do you mean by nucleated rural settlements? These means settlements where people lived but the agricultural fields or the agricultural areas were outside of the settlement area. Right? So these such settlements were called nucleated settlements. Okay, that were only for people to live but not for agricultural purposes. Fields were outside of the settlements. So such settlements also appeared first in this phase. Alright, then the texts, they mention about three types of villages. Three types of villages. The first type are villages that are inhabited by different castes and different communities together, and such villages are headed by a village headman. Alright, village headman who was called a bhojaka. The village headman was called the bhojaka. Right? The second type of village are suburban villages, which provides connection between the towns and the countrysides. Alright, and suburban villages are mainly craft villages. For example, we have the mention of a carpenter's village near Varanasi. Alright, so these are craft villages. Then the third type of villages are border villages, which lie on the boundaries of the countrysides. That means these villages then merged into the forests. Alright, and most of the people who lived there led a backward life and they were mostly into hunting and gathering. Alright. Now we also see that the village lands were divided into cultivable plots, and the plots were allotted to families. Alright, plots were allotted family wise. Right, and these fields were fenced. We have seen wooden palisades in Patna, right? Fields were fenced and irrigation canals were dug. Right. Some of the villages, as mentioned, were also granted to Brahmanas and the merchants just for enjoyment. Alright. The rich peasants, they were called grihapatis. Right. Rice was the staple cereal during this period. Right. And we also find the mention of paddy transplantation during this period. Paddy transplantation, and the texts say that large-scale paddy transplantation was done. Alright. The use of iron plowshares and the fertile soil of the Gangetic Basin, this actually led to advances in agriculture. As we have said, now iron is used extensively in agriculture, right? So this has actually led to advances in agriculture, alright? And this advanced food producing economy that we see is spread over mainly the middle Gangetic Basin, alright, middle Gangetic Basin, and thus we see the beginning of an urban economy. Now since agricultural production is more, now tax collection is possible, and with the tax collection, maintenance of a large army is also possible, right? And with increase in tax collection and with the maintenance of a big army, we can actually say that the large territorial states could sustain now in a better way, alright? So after discussing about the material life of the people in the age of Buddha, in our next lecture on chapter 12, we will talk about the administrative system, the army and taxation system of the states. We'll also talk about the republics and the differences of the republics with the monarchies. And overall, we will look into how the age of Buddha was important in the history of ancient India, right? So till we meet next, keep learning. Thank you.